since the very beginning, even with the Portola Party, it's been a story of people just trying to get out of here as quick as they can, and building better highways to do it. And whether you look at the idea of the first struggling people coming over Fremont Pass, or the Beals Cut, or the tunnel, or Sierra Highway, or anything else, it was trying to get. So I guess this kind of left us, you might say, like a rural backwash. While the rest of Los Angeles County certainly developed, this area didn't. And it really wasn't until the 1960s that you begin to see some sort of signs of visual, of great progress going on. Up until the 1960s, I think that if Henry Mayo Newhall arrived, he wouldn't see that great a difference in the town, from 100 years before. And it was still mainly cattle and a lot of dry farming going on. It was still an area where the trains stopped twice a day. The trains were the main connection for people getting down to Los Angeles. And it was a typical rural community. In fact, it was great for movies. All the great cowboy movies were shot out here because everybody always referred to Newhall as the last of the old West towns. And you could come out here from the days 1914, William S. Hart was shooting movies out here. In the 20s, it was Tom Mix. And clear up into the present time, there's still Hollywood's back lot, so to speak. But the major draw to the film companies, especially in the days of the big westerns, was the fact that San Fernando Road was dirt, and you had all these false front buildings facing it. It just looked like a typical Old West village.
Henry Mayo Newhall was my grandfather. He was a young man who was born in Saugus, or in Lynn, Massachusetts, outside of Boston. He left home after the family had been there ever since 1630, and I think he was the first Newhall to get up off the cobbler's bench and go out exploring the world. He left Saugus when he was a young man, along around 18, I suppose, 30 or 40 in there, 1840 or 50.
Settlement started really in about 1804 when they put a small submission up in back of what is now Magic Mountain on a little ridge up there called the Asistencia de San Francisco. And of course, in time, Spain was kicked out of the New World. Mexico took over. California became part of the Mexican Republic. And the lands that are now the Santa Clarita Valley were granted to Don Antonio del Valle in 1839. And that was everything that ran from Piru Creek out to Canyon Country, 48,000 acres. Of course, in 1847, the Americans arrived in the form of Colonel John Charles Fremont and his buckskin battalion. They accepted the surrender of the Mexican troops down in the San Fernando Valley at Coahuila when General Pico surrendered to Fremont. After that, there was not exactly a mass migration, but a certain arrival of Americans in the valley, some of which have become place names. There was Henry Clay Wiley. Wiley Canyon Road is named for him. He had a stagecoach stop at what is now Eternal Valley Cemetery. And the pass that Fremont went over, that was referred to as Fremont Pass, was a major stagecoach route coming from the east to Los Angeles, the northward into San Francisco, which prompted Wiley, of course, to build his stage station there. It was a very steep drop coming down the backside of the mountains over Fremont Pass. In fact, they used to have a windlass or a rope attached up there, and when you got to the top of the pass, they lowered you down. And I would imagine even if you were a teetotaler, you would have to have a drink at Wiley's Saloon after dropping down the hillside after that. Wiley sold out to the Lyon brothers, Sanford and Cyrus Lyons, and they established Lyon Station stage stop. That was in 1852. Well, wait a minute, Lyons came along in 1854. And that's really when things began booming, because there was a gold rush up on the Kern River. And of course, Fort Tejon in that same year was established up on Grapevine Pass. So this became the major transportation route, getting up over the mountains down to Wiley's and later Lyon Station. And then they used to go up San Francisco Canyon to Lake Hughes, cross over to Fort Tejon, and then come down into the valley, into the San Joaquin Valley. So it became rather a major transportation area. In fact, that tradition has continued up to the present day, you know, with Interstate 5. Before that it was 99. Before that it was the Ridge Route. And everybody seemed to be in a big rush to, you know, get the hell out of here as fast as possible. It seemed to be the main thrust. So because of that, the little communities out here that were eventually established really weren't that big or that impressive. They were just little crossroads farming communities, actually what we refer to as tank towns, because when the railroad came through in 1876, Newhall and Acton and several other stations that have now fallen by the wayside were established at that time. From the north came Henry Mayo Newhall, who bought the thing in 1875. Newhall came from Saugus, Massachusetts, where he was born. And he came to California with the gold rush and actually did very poorly panning for gold. So what he did, he went back to San Francisco. And he was an auctioneer back east before he came out here. Newhall started auctioning off these cargoes of ships that came in. In those days, you didn't have you know, wholesalers and clearinghouses and methods like you have now. A ship would come in with a cargo, and they would auction it off, and the highest bidder would get whatever the cargo was. So he did quite well with that. In fact, he started building a railroad line out of San Francisco. When Southern Pacific came along and they bought him out, they gave him $1.25 million. And with that money, Newhall began buying up several ranches in the state, the old land grant ranches. Of course, they were going through very hard times in the early 1870s. There had been a tremendous drought in California in the late 1860s. And the drought, of course, dried up the grass, the springs all died. The great Spanish or Mexican dons were quite bankrupt. That's the best word to use. So they began selling off their holdings. And one of the holdings that was sold off was the old Rancho San Francisco, the Del Valle holdings. Newhall bought it in 1875, and the price he paid was just slightly under $2 an acre for 48,000 acres, which wasn't a bad deal, although at the time everybody thought it was outrageous that Newhall got took. But try to buy something for $2 an acre around here today, and maybe not so bad. Of course, Newhall, being on the board of directors of the Southern Pacific, knew that the direct line from Los Angeles to San Francisco was coming through this old Rancho San Francisco. Of course, you can go out and see the railroad tracks now. They were laid in 1876. The two lines, the one from the north and the one from the south, met out in Soledad Canyon at a place called Lang Station. And on September the 3rd of 1876, a golden spike was driven out there, which united finally northern and southern California. Kind of hard to believe, but in those days, before that golden spike was driven, it was a lot easier to get on a train at San Francisco and get to Omaha or New York than it would be to get down to Los Angeles. In fact, it was less time. If you came to Los Angeles, the best way to come was by coastal steamer. You'd get on a steamer at San Francisco and chug down to Los Angeles. If you got on the stagecoach, it might take you 7 or 8 days to get from San Francisco to Los Angeles. Stagecoaches also had other problems. They frequently got robbed. There was a lot of lawless goings on in California in those days. And I guess really the king of the bandits was Tiburcio Vasquez, whom Vasquez Rocks County Park is named for. Vasquez was an interesting character. He not only just robbed stagecoaches and freight wagons, he took over whole towns. Hollister was taken over by Vasquez. They tied up every male citizen in the town while he romanced the women. He had quite a way with the girls. Anyway, and then while these guys were all tied up and laying around in the streets, they just casually took everything out of the stores and banks and hotels and whatnot and loaded on the backs of horses, and off they went. And then posses would be sent out all over the place looking for him, and he'd be down here in Vasquez Rocks, relaxing and having a good time. Poor old Tiburcio finally got caught down in Cahuenga Pass. He was visiting a friend of his named Greek George Allen. And Greek George made the disastrous mistake of going to town for supplies and leaving his wife there to entertain Vasquez. Well, Mrs. Allen was doing such a bang-up job of occupying Vasquez that the sheriff's posse surrounded the house and captured him. And after a hail of bullets and all this, he was taken to town. I think it was amazing when he got into jail in Los Angeles that the sheriff actually allowed women to come into the cell and hang curtains on the windows and put doilies on the tables, and men had come in giving bottles of whiskey and this sort of thing. Tiburcio started selling postcards of himself at $0.25 apiece, and probably made more money hawking postcards than he ever did robbing towns. But unfortunately, the fellow was hung the same year that Newhall bought the ranch, 1875.
Originally, I came through here in 1920 with my parents in a Peerless touring car on our way to San Francisco. And then later, in the 28s and 29s, I came up here as a Boy Scout. In the 30s, the early 30s, I used to come through here on my way to, with my race car, on my way to Muroc, which is now Edwards Air Force Base. And Newhall was totally blacked out in those days because we went through here at midnight. And we came through here on our way to Edwards to race, and then came back late at night. But I came up here permanently in 1950 to get away from people. And at that time, the altitude of Newhall was 1,250 feet, and that was equal to the population which was printed on the sign as you entered Newhall. Population 1,250, elevation 1,250. So coming up here to get away from people, since I was working and traveling out of Burbank, the people have followed. Matter of fact, my friends used to say, "Hey, do you like Newhall?" I said, "No, it's terrible. It's hot in the summer and cold in the winter." He says, "Well, I'm going to come up there anyway." I said, "You better not, because we have Paiute tribesmen on the hills with 30-30s, and they shoot all strangers." But that didn't work. They came anyway.
It's changing out here very rapidly, unfortunately. The development, the homes are popping up just left and right all over the place. They're cutting down beautiful mountains, chopping them down, flattening them out, putting big homes on them. And I really don't understand the whole reason why. I can't, just for more people to move from the San Fernando Valley out here. We're migrating. Pretty soon we're going to be heavily populated all the way to Bakersfield, it seems like. And it's sad.
I'm fairly new to the area, about a year and a half. Donna?
I've lived out here going on 12 years in August. When I moved out here, there was just this street, and that was it. Everything else was still a two-way road. The train station still ran, still stopped over on the Saugus and San Fernando Road. Lyons Avenue was still one-way, or two-way actually. There wasn't even a grocery store built there. It was little hick town. It wasn't even on the map.
With horses and everything. I used to come out here in the 60s, early 60s, and shoot rabbit right up Bouquet Canyon, up where I live now, where there is nothing but tract homes. It's grown quite a bit.
Quite a bit, it has.
A commuter mess with people that live here and work down in the valley, San Fernando Valley. It's kind of hard to get in and out. And it doesn't look like it's going to change. They're still building. Yeah, building.
But they're building more homes and things, but they're not building access roads to get out of here.
Right. Yeah,
You're still using the two-way road here to get in and out, and it's just a mess.
That's why I'm
crazy.
moving out of Saugus into Newhall, because of that intersection.
The changes prior to the 10 years were excellent and progressive and improved the quality of life. In the past 10 years, it's been just the opposite. The quality of life is eroded and continues to erode, mainly for the lack of infrastructure when all of these developments come in. Infrastructure meaning water supply, roads, police, fire, and all of the corollary services.
In the 1960s, we began to get this gradual development, this growth, tract homes, shopping centers. It was really accelerated by the 1970s. In fact, the population growth was like 250% between 1960 and 1970. between 1970 and 80, it was dropped down to only about 48%. But still in all, as you walk around today, you see this, tract homes going up and the mountains being torn down. And I'm not opposed to growth. I think, it's great. I'm a proponent of orderly growth. I think that if you're going to build some tract homes, you ought to provide schools for the people that are going to be living there. You've got to provide roads for people to get in and out of the place. They're talking about massive developments in Pico Canyon, and it's almost impossible to get off the Interstate High freeway at 5 o'clock in the afternoon and get across and down into Newhall. If they put 1,800 homes in a convention complex in Pico Canyon, you'll never get off that freeway. The same thing's going on out in Canyon Country. They're building homes down in a wash. Back in 1969, that whole area was underwater. What'll happen if we do it again?
I don't know much about the history of the Santa Clarita Valley, unfortunately. All I've heard as far as Newhall area, the big Newhall family, Newhall Land and Farming that owns, I would say, a large majority of the property, of some of the more beautiful property, I would say, in the Santa Clarita Valley. And unfortunately, they're the ones that are selling out for profit reasons to build, selling out to contractors to build homes and industry and restaurants and everything on the land.
I guess it's inevitable. But is that the kind of progress that you want? Is that the kind of progress that you struggled for? That a few people, the developers, who live as far away as New Jersey, none of them live in this area, they come swooping in, hire some people for several months or a year, sell the houses, and then swoop out and go to another place, maybe Tucson. So there's no lasting fidelity. That's good. No lasting fidelity to the area. It's something to make money with.